If you've spent a hot minute in this world, you'll realize that the world is pretty hierarchical, in the sense that people are shunted and stuck in categories that they may or may not have chosen for themselves. It's basically unavoidable. Now, a lot of people have issues with this and take issue with this in the sense that they don't like it. And I think when you look at left-wing politics, you pretty much see the embodiment of a kind of rebellion against the notion of hierarchy to begin with, though they have their own weird hierarchies there too as well. But the topic of today is the concept of deservingness theory, which is a theory developed in social psychology to explain why people basically get upset when other people who they don't deem as appropriate exit the hierarchies that they should be assigned to or should be stuck in and do something else. And you see this really across the board in human existence. It's basically the embodiment of the concept of know your place. So we've all seen examples of this. Let's go through a whole bunch, actually, because it's very illustrative. I bet you've seen some dude who looks kind of schlumpy, not particularly attractive, nothing special about him, with a fairly hot girl. Now, it's possible she's an escort, it's possible there's some weird situation going on there, but usually, when you see a phenomenon like this, you start asking yourself questions. You wonder, wait a second, what's going on there? So the first thing you might assume there is schlumpy, ugly guy is in fact rich. That's the only way he acquired his arm candy. And that's entirely possible. In fact, it doesn't happen infrequently. And if it turns out that he's not rich, then you're going to dig even more deeply, in which case you're probably going to go for the schlong. He might have a BBC or a BWC or whatever. But once you run out of the superficial explanations, you're kind of left aghast and puzzled at this phenomenon of this hot girl with the schlumpy, ugly, and unimpressive guy. And some people, not everybody, males much less so than females to be honest, some people get really upset. They say this guy does not deserve to be together with this hot girl. There's the reverse as well. There's a really famous instance of this online. The situation is basically a morbidly obese woman whose husband is very fit and very attractive. And you know the way women operate in terms of their inclination towards reputational damage. And wow, they are vicious towards this woman online. Because, again, she's relatively unattractive facially. She's definitely morbidly obese, and her husband is quite attractive. On top of that, he looks like he earns pretty well. So part of this is envy, but the other big part of this is simply this notion of social hierarchy ultimately derived from your physical appearance, which is where a lot of deservingness theory comes from. This woman has circumvented the normal gatekeeping, the normal boundaries of hierarchy because she's morbidly obese and therefore not very attractive, and acquired a very attractive husband, and so she's committed a violation. Of course, this doesn't just apply to looks. You have other instances of this, for example. Most people's objection to social welfare, to be honest, in terms of the finances, is that poor people are all inherently lazy, which, on the face of it is kind of ridiculous if you think about it. There are plenty of poor people that work really hard, but the idea is that if you're poor, you deserve to be poor, it's your own fault, and therefore you don't deserve any sort of aid or help from people that quote-unquote do deserve it. But here's another really interesting and more recent example of this, and this one is related to the drug Ozempic. As many of you might know, Ozempic has been making the rounds. Now, it was originally conceived as a diabetic drug to help people with diabetes control their blood sugar levels, but it's been discovered in recent years that it's also very effective at regulating and controlling appetite. And despite what a lot of people will claim, ultimately, apart from obvious calories in, calories out, basic physics, what governs your inclination to gain weight is appetite. Most people who aren't particularly overweight, not everybody, most people, they just don't feel a lot of hunger. Have you ever asked Petey the Punani Slayer what he thinks about food? Not a whole lot. He doesn't think about food. It's a chore to him sometimes, and a lot of people are like that. Converse is true as well. People with a lot of appetite tend to struggle with that, etc., etc. And anyway, Ozempic is a bit controversial. There are some side effects apparently, and not everyone's in agreement about it. But one thing everyone is in agreement on is that it is very effective at controlling appetite, i.e., it stymies and stifles your hunger feeling. And so a lot of people who used to be very overweight or even obese have lost a lot of weight, and they're using the drug to do this. And it's interesting because Many of the responses you see out there are not just responses about, well, we don't know the long-term side effects after, say, 20 years, we only have short-term studies, which is totally reasonable, but rather, hey, you fatty, you don't deserve to lose weight. You're taking a shortcut. You need to do it the hard way, either like I did or like somebody I know. This is yet another manifestation of deservingness theory. You found a drug that works for you. Let's set aside the potential side effects for the time being because who knows, and it's really separate from the discussion. This drug works. You have lost whatever it might be, 20 pounds, 40 pounds in freedom units. And before that time, you could not lose those 40 pounds. You were struggling for a decade, 15 years. And all of a sudden, this drug comes on the market, and now you can lose weight. And people are angry about it. You should see the comment sections and videos talking about Ozempic or comments on Reddit. I mean, people are vicious. The Ozempic takers are, according to them, lazy, undeserving, and evil people. Now, the obesity epidemic is a thing unto itself, and personally at this stage, if you look at the statistics, I think the drug probably is the best hope in combating it, even if there are side effects, although it's very expensive. Hopefully the market drives down the price, because conventional means don't work. The US, for example, is heading off a cliff in terms of obesity rates, and in 20 years, something like 60% of the population will be obese, assuming things continue on the current trajectory, obviously. But what I'm more interested in is why people don't like this. Well, people don't like shortcuts. That's one thing. People hate shortcuts. People have this obsession with hard work and how hard work does everything. I've talked about it separately in other videos, but it's true. They think hard work is the key to success. And in many instances, hard work is a requirement, but it's not everything. It's not necessarily even the key to success. And hard work sometimes isn't even required in many cases. That's something people don't like to say. But in the case of weight loss, people want to see some heroic journey, right? The guy was 100 pounds overweight, and through hard work and exercise and lifting weights and diet and jogging and cycling and whatever, he lost the weight and he kept it off. Everyone says, "Yeah, congratulations, man! Like you're based, you're amazing, yeah, bro, yeah, bro." And then you have the other example: the guy was 100 pounds overweight, and he took a drug, Ozempic, and all of a sudden he lost more than half his appetite, and he just starts eating less, and he just loses weight, and he barely exercised, and he barely did anything in the gym, and people are pissed off about this. This is because, again, getting back to deservingness theory, hierarchies exist, and they exist on multiple fronts. In this case, it's the hierarchy of if you're big and fat, you quote unquote deserve it. And that is your place in the world because you don't have the quote unquote willpower or the quote unquote discipline to change things. But it's always funny to me at the same time because, as I mentioned, the key to weight loss really is appetite regulation at the end of the day. Some people are just inclined to eat a lot. Other people have hardly any interest in food. And that's what we're seeing with this drug. You cut the appetite in half, and wow, people who normally love food lose their interest in food, just like PD the Punani Slayer doesn't have much interest in food. But this basically explains broadly why you see such phenomena as with inkwells, where they're really treated poorly because they're short or ugly or any combination of these things. Yes, it's because they are short and ugly in many cases, and people don't like that. And their internal subconscious associations with things like genetic health and fertility and things of that nature on the one hand, but it's also if you fit a certain category, whether it be down to looks, whether it be down to economics, whether it be down to weight, whether it be down to height, whether it be down to intellect, well, if you ever do manage to escape the category that you've been stuck in, people are going to be really pissed off, especially when they think, oh, he doesn't quote unquote deserve it because he's not very attractive, he's not smart enough, he's whatever. And believe you me, we've all done this at certain points in our life. Even I've done it sometimes. I've seen dudes walking with girls where I just thought, what's going on here? This guy must have a schlong the size of an elephant or something like that. That's the only explanation for what I'm observing right now. And women in particular, when it comes to looks, they're really, really cognizant of this. If they see a Becky with a Chad or an average looking woman with a Chad, they will flip their lids, they will lose it. And ultimately, the vast majority of this is subconscious. This is not people consciously thinking about this. This is just how we evolved as human apes, as animals, to assign people to various categories and moving outside of the hierarchy, even in interesting instances, such as the example with Ozempic and weight loss, because the hierarchy there is if you lose weight, you have to do it through hard work and perseverance, not with drugs. People get really upset with that. And within the so-called fitness community, you see this too with respect to juice, right? Because the reality is most people who are upset about juice users are not upset that they're risking their health or their lives or their longevity long term. They're upset that they're cheating and they're making gains that the critics cannot have because they're not juicing themselves. So on the one hand, it's very understandable why we evolved this way and why we think this way. On the other hand, it's a kind of strange thing because if you think, as I mentioned before, perfect example, with the obesity epidemic, so many people in so many Western countries and also in China these days are struggling to maintain control and indeed lose their weight on a long-term basis, and people get upset that they're using a drug that's really effective to do it. Again, set aside the long-term side effects. That's not what people are upset about. They're not upset, for example, that Ozempic long-term might cause gastrointestinal problems or issues with the thyroid. They'll mention that kind of as an afterword, as an afterthought, but what they're really upset about is they cheated. They broke their hierarchy. They're not allowed to. But overall, the conclusion to be drawn here is that human beings suck immensely. We suck immensely. Never forget that. We are pathetic animals, despite how we claim otherwise, despite how we delude ourselves into thinking we're anything other than stupid, hairless apes, stuck on a rock doomed to annihilation long term, hurtling about the cosmos. Anyway, on that joyous note, thank you very much indeed for tuning in. As always, many special thanks to my patrons on Patreon and my donors on PayPal. You guys are the best. You guys are indispensable for the channel's long-term longevity, existence, etc., etc., and for that I am eternally grateful. As for everybody else, if you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, be much appreciated. They tell me that stuff works. Doesn't seem to be very much, to be honest, especially in recent months. And if I'm still alive, I'll check you out next time. Until then, may the gods truly watch over you. Bye-bye for now.
If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.